Problem is, no one's listening to it. And so for most people, and this is one of the reasons I believe there's so much churn with podcasting, meaning 85% fail within the first few months. It's the other two P's. Promotion. So how am I growing my audience so more people than just my mom are listening? And profitable. Can I actually sustain the growth? Because what I find, if you don't have a profit, you're not incented to keep with it. Like, why am I spending all this time with this? Why can't even break even, let alone make money?
Hey everyone, this is Mark DeGrasse, the president of Digital Marketer, and this is the podcast that keeps you up to date on everything you need to know when it comes to digital marketing, from the platforms you should be focused on to the kind of tactics and tools that are working today. Today, our guest is Tony Guarnaccia, the founder of Castosity, and we're talking AI app development and kind of overall app kind of execution, how you create the apps themselves, then how you use them to serve your clients with a specific kind of focus on podcasting. And making them profitable, which as a podcast, I could definitely appreciate. So welcome, Tony.
Thanks so much. Pleasure being here today.
All right, let's just get into kind of the history of app development, because I think, a lot of people don't realize how difficult programming apps has been for kind of the dawn of the internet. I think between the years of 2008 and 2012, during the app boom, everybody thought, oh yeah, I'll jump on and do it. And then people started to realize that an average app was $70,000 to $500,000, and everybody kind of gave up, and then nobody wanted to develop apps anymore. But that is changing thanks to AI. I was hoping you kind of walk us through the process of what's different now from back then.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny how things go full circle, because I've been in this game for longer than I like to admit. But I started way back when there was tools that probably most of us never heard of, like Dreamweaver, and started programming way back then, basic HTML sites, and kind of worked my way up to doing more development. But at some point you get beyond your capacity, because I've always been a marketer first and a developer second. And a lot of people kind of go in the other way around. And so ultimately, if I wanted to build something sophisticated, it would usually require, a team. It usually required maybe outsourcing, and it became really expensive. And so I'm super excited about where we are today, because now you can literally do what you couldn't do it before and do it for practically no money at all.
That's incredible. And, as somebody who always had app ideas and, realized how expensive it would be, that is music to my ears. So what have you kind of used it for recently to make your life easier? Or I know you're launching some products too, right?
Yeah, AI is really changing the game for me. And so oddly enough, I started working on a software company before the pandemic. And so I was working on software and trying to create really a messaging platform. So how do you take things like your value proposition, elevator pitch? And so I came up with this platform, and it was kind of Mad Lib style. You put in this little bracket, and this is what you're supposed to say. And then it would kind of take it and jumble it together using things like JavaScript and really code that nobody really cares about. And so, gee whiz, it never got any traction. And so this was during the pandemic. And so I said, okay, let's try something else. So it happens to be right around the pandemic, I launched a book, and I did a podcast book tour. And, with this book tour, I went on, I think, 86 podcasts in 2020, learned a lot about the pain points of podcasters, ended up closing my agency because we lost a ton of revenue overnight virtually because we were heavy in travel and events. I said, you know what, let's just pivot completely into software. And so I took this concept and I said, okay, what would be a great market? And I said, well, podcasting. And so I started that software company really kind of out of just my own needs, because I said, okay, I can make this process better for myself, and then eventually became something for others. But kind of the common thread was like this whole Mad Libs scenario. But most recently, that's completely changed, because all that function I had before now is now in hyperdrive, because those same Mad Libs, you throw them into an AI engine like OpenAI and just simply connect to their AI, and instantly, like in my software, what we do is we build things for like podcasters as well as guests. So for example, if I want to be a guest on a show like this, I might say, hey, here's some great questions to ask me. Here's some wonderful topics. Here's my intro. And so that's always been a pain to create. Like, how do you write your own bio? I've been in marketing for 25 years. I don't know how to write about myself, but all I do is I put a couple key points in it, throw in the AI engine, and boom, it's automatically created. And so it's been a real game changer, because the use case is completely different. It can take what you have already and kind of take it to the next level. But beyond that, the development cycle is like way shorter, because if I had to code this myself, which I can't code enough to be dangerous, but when I throw into AI, the AI not only will give me the data and rewrite it, but actually will write the code that generates it. So it's kind of almost like a circular loop.
Oh, I love that. Well, I love how it's, your past knowledge actually applies to AI now because you have an understanding of programming, you have an understanding of UI and kind of the, how people interact with an app. And if you don't have that, AI is not going to fix that issue because you still need the actual knowledge. So I think, you're in like the perfect place because the situation you were talking about where it's the programmer first before the people, the people who actually use the app, you end up with these apps that just have weird functionality and they're not very intuitive and they have to be learned. And so one of the things I always talk about with app developers is I don't think that anybody's going to tolerate apps needing an education. Like they're not going to say like, I do it all the time. I would download the app and then you start trying to use the app and you're like, but how does it do that thing that I saw in the video? Just do that. And then it takes you 50 steps and you have to learn the whole thing. Like, okay, that's it. I'm done. I'm not going to use this. So if you actually, in that regards, have you seen it that you could make, better apps or more intuitive apps that actually do more things than they could before?
Yeah, so I think the common thread with AI, regardless of whether you're using it to write copy or if you're using it to write a program, you have to know the right prompts or questions to ask. And it's garbage in, garbage out. So even though I'm using AI primarily to write some of the software, I still have to know the right questions. And a lot of time, it still hallucinates, right? Especially, I'm talking ChatGPT specifically. So I'll ask something, and it'll give me a really hard way of solving a problem. That might be like, as an example, like 50 lines of code, when the same thing could be done in like 5. And I would know that because I do have a programming. So it's great as an accessory. It's also a great way to learn. Like I find while I'm doing it, it gives me suggestions. I'm like, wow, I would never thought of that. And that's where AI becomes very, very powerful.
That's fantastic. It's funny because I was putting in, math problems that my son had for schoolwork, and there were some like advanced math problems. Like, holy crap, I don't know how to do that. So I literally just put it into ChatGPT. But you're right. If you just let it go crazy, then it'll give you some technical explanation or blah blah blah. So just that little prompt, like explain it like I was 5 years old, and then you get something that's a little bit more understandable. Now, I will say this because I'm trapped in that currently where I used to have all my big app ideas. And the more I kind of got into the process of making apps, the more I was like, okay, this is going to cost $1 billion. So I'm just going to scale back my, vision where it's like, I wanted to do that, but that would be too much. So now I scale it all back. Have you found it difficult to kind of get back into that innovative mindset? Like, hey, anything is possible. Like, what can it do? Or what should I do? Because there's just so much I can do. Did you have that process or were you?
I would say no. I would say my vision is that if anything expanded, but where the challenge is prioritization. Because the entrepreneur, like I'm an entrepreneur, right? And so what do? We chase shiny objects. If I try saying that 3 times fast. So you chase the shiny objects. So the idea is really to have discipline. And so it's very important to kind of have a roadmap or where you want to go and how you're going to get there and actually stay to it, because the tendency is say, oh, wow, I can do this, I can do that, and let's do everything. And ultimately, you're not really growing, you're not making any money off of that, and it gets you nowhere. So really, it's like the kid in the candy store is where I find myself nowadays.
No, and that's so true too, because now you're too expansive. Like, oh my gosh, I could do that. I could pull that data and combine it with this data and blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden you have something that's super complicated again. So it's almost like you have to think, like you said, you just have to plan it out, stick to the plan, make the thing.
Hey everyone, I wanted to quickly interrupt the podcast for a special announcement. If you're listening to this podcast because you want to become a better marketer, then I want to share with you what I believe to be the most comprehensive digital marketing program on the market today. It's called the Digital Marketing Mastery Certification. You'll learn to leverage the tools and channels to predictably and profitably drive awareness, leads, sales, and referrals. Everything you need to know to become a true master of digital marketing. We'll take an in-depth look at the core digital marketing competencies, including content, email, social media, community, digital advertising, data and optimization, and more. After earning your digital marketing strategy certificate, you'll have the tools to effectively reach your target audience through a full scope marketing strategy. Get started today at digitalmarketer.com/strategy-cert.
So let's assume you did that. So you got an idea, you execute the idea. How do you now, test it? How do you see if people actually like the concept?
Yeah. So what I tend to do, and I'll speak specifically to podcasting. So the way I do it is I actually kept, really reconfigured my agency. So I had the traditional digital marketing agency. I worked with everybody. I did that for a decade. As I said, I changed paths with the pandemic. But then after I launched my software company, I said, gee, why not like start an agency again and then use my agency for podcasting instead of doing everything or doing fractional CMO like I was doing. I was like, let's just focus on this one concept. Actually, I'll give credit to Ryan Dice. I got the idea at the last Scalable. But so I was like, okay. But beyond kind of getting cash flow, which is nice, it's actually the perfect testing ground. So what I do is I have my own agency clients. I run my software through them, get feedback from them directly from a real user. And then once it works, then I'll start expanding it out into kind of people I know, into JV partners. And then once that gets going, that accelerate the growth through ad campaigns and things like that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I love the testing because, that was another thing that I realized with the whole app development cycle was that it was so long that by the time you finally had an app, you were like, you know what? We don't have time to test. Let's get it out there. We said we were going to deliver it a month ago, so now we're in trouble. So just get it out there. So that's awesome too, that you could develop it so fast or even live, have it tested with people that you know. And then now you can take something to market that is going to both function and hopefully do something good. Now in your regards to your mention of profit, I know you have the 4 Ps. So let's talk about those real quick.
Sure. So what I found doing all those podcast tours and why I entered this market in the first place, there's really 4 Ps as it comes to podcasting. You have the planning. Hey, what content should I have? What kind of guests should I invite? That's great. Then the next thing is, okay, production. I got to make sure this looks good. I'll make sure it sounds good. I'm going to invest all this time in editing, make sure it's perfect. Problem is, no one's listening to it. And so for most people, and this is one of the reasons I believe, there's so much churn with podcasting, meaning 85% fail within the first few months. It's the other 2 Ps. Promotion. So how am I growing my audience so more people than just my mom are listening? And profitable. Can I actually sustain the growth? Because what I find, if you don't have a profit, you're not incented to keep with it. Like, why am I spending all this time with this? Why can't you even break even, let alone make money? And so my software is all focused on the last 2. How do I make a profit out of this? And how do I make it, promote it? And using basically these systems, the software, to do it in a way that's very easy and very scalable.
I love that. Well, and then you actually showed me before the show a plugin that you developed in a weekend for WordPress that generates an entire page of podcast, guest content. Walk me through that, because that blew my mind.
Sure. So again, sticking to the theme where I say, okay, promotion. So what I find, I've been on a lot of podcasts, and like inevitably people focus on the podcast itself, which is fantastic. But what about after the podcast? Like why spend all this time building an amazing relationship and then never continue it? But then beyond that, why create all this amazing content and then actually distribute it? And one of the first places you should distribute is your website. And so, like everyone else, I hired an assistant VA to post these blog posts every time I do an interview. Like this one, I'll make sure I post on my website and tell people about it. That's great. Problem is, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of headache. And that's why I had this idea literally over a weekend. I said, wow, what if I could make a WordPress plugin that could take all the podcasts I've done hundreds, and automatically post it to my website? And so that's what I did. Literally, so AI can use in 2 ways. One, to integrate with it and make your data stronger and do something actual with it. That's one way I use AI. But then you actually can use the AI to build the tools themselves. So I did this kind of thought experiment literally over a weekend. I built this whole WordPress plugin to build it. It works. It's on my website. And then the next stage, I'm going to use AI to say, okay, I have this plugin. How can I actually market and monetize it? And so now, and the goal is, hey, I'm going to do a case study. This is how I made $100,000 with this plugin, literally just working a few hours over the weekend.
Oh man, that's incredible. Now, I do need that app, by the way, because you showed it to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to put that on my website right now, because I don't list all my podcasts that I'm on, because I'm like, I don't have time, and it's going to take me a while to find all the things. And I got to link them all, build the pages, and just so everybody knows what you just described. Like if you did it manually, if you said, I'm going to pull my guests, every podcast they've ever been on, and create a page for them, that could take even an experienced person like half an hour, maybe more, depending on how fancy you want to get with the design. And this did it. I watched him do it, and it was like 10 seconds or something. You pulled all of my podcasts that I've been on. I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. So no, it's super impressive. Now, with all that said, how do you think agencies could use kind of, your process or kind of what you're doing? Do you think they could use it for, making a brand new service, even if they don't have extensive, software experience? Or do you think it's more for like, hey, here's how to serve your clients better? Like, what's the best use for that?
Yeah, I would say if I was an agency, which I was, and I did this. So where I started was taking my process and really systematizing it. And the way I think about it is, can you take your process and systematize it, which makes you more efficient, but you can actually add much more value if you turn into software. Because if you think about it, now you have a user interface for your clients that's proprietary, that's yours. And so that builds your own value as an asset if you wanted to sell your agency. Because let's face it, agency multiples, if you want to sell it, you really aren't that great. And so if you can build assets in your business, it's much more valuable. But then beyond that, you can then say, okay, can I enable this for other agencies? And in fact, that's what I did. Like, I took my own processes, I systematized them, I turned them into software. Now I use it for my clients, which builds a lot of value with them and makes us proprietary. But then secondly, I'm going to offer this as a tool for consumers to do directly. And then the next stage after that, I'm going to do an agency version. So now podcast agencies can book their clients on podcasts as a guest, or either help them launch their own podcasts.
That's amazing. No, and I think that's I love how you said about the systemization, because, digital marketer, we're always talking about our frameworks and, having an overarching strategy and all these things. But, if you, have your own agency, you probably have your own process. And in addition to, making your company more, money in terms of the value you could get for it when you sell it, everybody's always impressed by that. Well, impressed by frameworks, number one, but you add an app in there, and now you're over the top. You're like, okay, hey, first I need you to download our app. It's going to walk you through our process and provide instructions with how everything did and forms for you to fill out. And I mean, that's like next level. But at this point, based on how easy you make this whole process sound, I think it's going to be a requirement. Like, people aren't going to hire somebody and not expect an experience that is just super simple, straightforward, and obvious.
Yeah, and I even learned this myself because, like I mentioned before, I created my own podcast agency to help people launch podcasts. And what I did personally, I was using like a project management tool, and I was keeping track of everything. And I got to the point, like, we weren't using it. I'm like, okay, we have this whole system, we're using this whole process. And I was like, it still doesn't work because it's not custom to what a podcast agency would do. So I was like, why not turn this into software? So I did that as well. And now we actually use it, but now it's the interface. So it's, again, you can use it in so many use cases, but I think the days of using like a Monday or Rike or whatever, those are limited, because if you can make your own proprietary system that's custom to your agency and how your workflow works, even though you can customize these to an amazing level, it's still not the same as having something you own yourself. And so that's the route I did on my podcast agency side.
I love that. Well, and it does provide, it makes it harder to transfer what you've done for a company to another agency, where if you said like, oh, well, I set up a big Click project manager, and now, number one, they could just leave, they have the ClickUp account, so it's not even your account. And then now you're kind of superfluous after you've kind of installed all the systems. So it's like, okay, thanks a lot, guys. See you later. And if it was your software, even if they did say we don't want to use you as a service, you can at least maintain them as a client, in terms of an app client, if you want to look at it like that. So I think all around it could be huge for marketing agencies, and you've kind of proven that. And now you're launching products all the time, and I'm super jealous at how many apps you're coming out with, because I'm like, I've always wanted to do an app. And now there's no excuse. So that's fantastic. Well, I think we'll definitely have you back on soon, and maybe we could walk you through like a single case study, kind of talk about the progression of how you launched your podcasting service and your software and transition, because I think the transition between these different things, and a lot of agency owners, I hate to say it, don't want to be agency owners after so much time, and that's why there's always this churn with marketing services, but if they could do what you're doing, then they could either, turn their business into something that's long-term profitable or sellable, or they could transition into more of a software company, which, is really the future of where everything's heading. So really appreciate your time, Tony. Where can people learn more in the meantime?
Yeah, so probably the best way is to connect with me on my website because then you can see all the different things I'm doing with AI and podcasting everywhere. And so you go to meettonyg.com because, of course, no one can say my last name. So meettonyg.com.
Well, thank you so much, Tony. Really appreciate your time. I'm super excited and definitely want to have you back soon to talk about all those other projects that you're doing. And we'll probably send you a bunch of app ideas so you can tell me how to do them myself, because that's a dream of mine. So thank you so much.
Happy to do so. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to hit that follow button so you get notified when all of our new episodes release. Please share this with that friend who's clueless about digital marketing. And don't forget to visit digitalmarketer.com where you can access all of our courses, certifications, and training programs. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you next time.